Democratic Party has a problem. Specifically a Joe Biden problem.
Yeah, his name is Biden.
Yeah, you might know him. He is not doing well against Donald Trump in a very good pollster, Siena New York Times poll. These guys are very, very good at what they do, and they found some interesting results. Ben, you want to go through a little bit of the highlights here?
Well, I think the overall was Donald Trump is net 5% over Biden. I think he leads Biden in this poll. He leads Biden in every major swing state except for Wisconsin, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, except for Wisconsin, where Biden leads by 4 points. Those are kind of the highlights.
What scares me here, what scares me so much is that this poll indicates that Biden and Trump are tied among people 18 to 29.
Yeah.
What's going on?
That's insane.
That's insane. We're talking about a demographic that voted for Biden like at least over 15 points.
And I do, this is where I wonder, like, are the people who aren't picking up the phone, are they more likely to be Biden? Is that where there might be some skew here?
That's all I can think of, but that just sounds like cope, doesn't it?
It does sound like cope. And I don't know. It's hard to even say that because in the past 2 presidential elections, the polls in both instances misjudged voting results in favor of Trump. So like they underestimated Trump.
Yes.
Which really frightens me here.
Right. So they've underestimated Trump, and now we're looking at the polls and we're like, oh, maybe they're underestimating Biden. That just sounds like cope to me.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
But it just gets hard for me to look at this poll and see, okay, 39% of the Hispanic vote going to Trump, 43 to Biden, a 4-point difference among Hispanics. Donald Trump winning other race and ethnicity by 13 points. That's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But maybe that's where we're at. Maybe maybe the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I saw some analysis about this specifically that said other polls in addition to this one have shown Biden losing ground amongst Black and Hispanic voters. Mm-hmm. So that seems like something that is signal, not noise. Mm-hmm. This poll also asked specifically, who do you prefer on each of the issues? And Trump took almost all of them, except for abortion. And I think the truth is, like, some of these Black and Hispanic voters, when they are polled, they say the most important issue, just like many people, is the economy. And there's still, I think, a messaging problem.
Yes.
Right? There is a perception problem that we're in a bad economy, that Trump was fantastic with the economy, and that people want that back. And it's so hard because it's hard to reverse. We've been in this state where we're raising rates over and over and over again. The stock market has kind of flatlined for a while. Prices obviously are up and they're not coming down because we're not going to deflate.
Right.
So people are looking at the things that affect them on a day-to-day basis. And they're seeing the criticism that consistently comes in from mainstream news outlets, which makes them think, okay, we're in a terrible situation, even though we're not.
Right. And it's hard because I read an interesting thing where it was someone arguing. I was looking over like a Twitter chain, right? And these 2 people were arguing back and forth, and they're arguing about inflation. He's like, but prices are still so high. And they're like, and the guy's explaining, he's like, yeah, but the rate has stopped increasing. The rate isn't as bad as it was. He's like, but when are prices going to go back down? And then the guy's like, no, prices aren't going to go back down. We can't deflate. Mm-hmm. That's not how it works. And he's like, well, then inflation's still a problem. There's an issue with the definitions of words going on here, but it's a fundamental reality that consumers are expecting prices to come back down, which, whether that's a fair expectation or not, is a reality that people feel and want to happen, and it's not going to happen. Yeah. And it's going to make people sour on the economy.
Yeah. And I don't, it's
How
disheartening.
do you sell that? How do you sell that as Joe Biden? How do you sell, look at all this progress we made, but the damage of inflation is already done?
Yeah. And how do you make people understand that it's okay that there's been inflation?
Right.
And that because wages have increased past inflation, faster than inflation, then the inflation isn't really hurting you anymore. Inflation only matters relative to the money you're getting paid, right? So we're not seeing decreasing standards of living because of the inflation. It's like people aren't making or failing to make this connection to the deeper underlying issue, the thing that actually matters, because we're so stuck looking at the headline numbers. And there, I think in this poll somewhere, or maybe in another one, but the question, I think I looked at maybe something else that Pew had done about people's perceptions of the economy, and what they're most concerned about is prices of fuel and prices of food.
Which are two things that a president just cannot
do anything about. Every time we talk about the inflation report on this podcast, we say those are two goods that are too volatile to even take into account the inflation of. And we talk about how every time it's a fuel price surge, it's because of something that OPEC or Russia has chosen to do, right? And you can argue like we should be oil independent. Well, that's not something that Trump got us on track to do. Biden, sure, maybe you could say he could subsidize more oil refinery processing capabilities in the US, and I wouldn't be completely against that. But there's no reason to think that someone else would do it better. And food, it's just like, that's changing constantly. There's an avian flu and then chicken prices and egg prices go up, right? It's like climate change means that you get a worse crop this year. These aren't things that presidents control.
Right. Now, right, exactly. And so it's frustrating. I'm sure it's frustrating the Biden campaign because they're thinking like, how the hell do we sell our achievements?
Yeah.
When all these things that are tied to not directly their policies are what's causing his approval to go down. Mm-hmm. Next question they asked was, if Donald Trump were convicted and sentenced to prison, but were still the Republican nominee, who would you vote for? And in this case, Joe Biden wins by 10. And in all of these states, swings like crazy. Arizona, Biden up 5, Georgia up by 12, Michigan up by whatever, almost 10. A lot of big swings here. So we'll talk about this in a little bit. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is not looking good legally. He's in a lot of trouble. Coming out of Georgia, he's in a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. So this is a very possible scenario, and it gives me a little bit of comfort that, okay, if the legal process if the legal process goes this way, Joe Biden's looking fine. But you never know.
Yeah, I'm not confident.
I know you're not
in Trump
convinced.
Convictions.
I know you're not as convinced as I am.
No, I just put a few things in here as well because I think the context. I was curious, like, what do people think Biden has done, and what do they care about those issues, mm-hmm. right? So I was curious of what people thought about climate change, because something that Biden, I would think, should be running on is how he's passed the most money for the green energy transition of anyone in history by far.
Oh, by
right?
far, but biggest in the world.
Yes, and that should matter because according to Pew, 67% of adults say the U.S. should prioritize developing alternative energy like wind and solar. 69% of adults favor the U.S. taking steps to become carbon neutral by 2050.
That's awesome to see.
And specifically, 2/3 of adults say the federal government should encourage the production of wind and solar power, right? So they actually want government subsidies, which is exactly what Biden has pushed so hard to get done. Mm-hmm. One thing that I do think is interesting is there are 43% of people who answered that same thing that want government subsidies to fund the use of electric vehicles. I think it's interesting how big of a drop-off there is between these two, because I recently saw a video about how electric vehicles are not necessarily the best technology for fighting climate change, because of the amount of energy it takes to make them, mm-hmm. right? And it takes so much fossil fuels to mine and refine all of the materials that we need to actually put into these batteries. And I wonder if that's where these views are coming from. But still, it's so many more people who think the government should encourage the use of electric vehicles than should discourage it.
Yeah. I think one of the big hurdles for electric vehicles has to be the price point. Mm-hmm. I think once consumers start seeing the price point drop off, especially over the next 7 years, they're going to feel totally different on that issue.
I think so too. Yeah. And so I just was looking into what people thought about the economy, and it's they think it's abysmal. They're so pessimistic about the economy. And I don't know. I hope other outlets do a better job of communicating that isn't really the case.
Yeah. I think it's also going to take some time for people to feel that their wages have kept up with inflation. I think that takes more time. Do you know what I mean?
Really? Do you think they do feel it?
I think they have to feel it.
Okay.
But I do think we have a big issue with our views of the economy about how partisan it's become. 2017, right when Obama leaves office, 46% of Democrats say the economy's good. 18% of Republicans say the economy's good. Trump's in office 1 year, and that number flip-flops pretty much. And it's just nuts. Like, that's really nuts.
Yeah.
Or like we look at the COVID pandemic, the Republicans pretty much think we're out of the recession by 2021. Only 19% think their economy is good by then. And, you know, we're now at a situation where Republicans think the economy is worse now than it was in the height of COVID. Well,
see, to me, it just follows so closely who is the president.
Right, exactly.
Right? And so what I think is I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it's what is Fox News saying? That's what the red line follows.
Yes.
What is MSNBC saying? That's what the blue line follows.
I think it might be that.
Right?
I think it just might be that simple.
Yeah.
I think it's all a perception game.
Yeah.
I think people don't actually... analyzing the economy is hard, right?
Yes.
So doing it, obviously, everyone doing it themselves is not possible.
No.
So
No.
I totally understand where this is... I see where this is coming from. I see it's just the media narrative that's doing this.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's just, obviously everyone just needs to listen to us because we know what's going on.
Yeah, we are way smarter than everybody else, and that's why we alone can fix it. As Donald Trump once said, I alone can fix this.
Yes. So watch us and give us all your money.
Yes.